Okay, so Invader Zim is about an
Oh, Code
alien.
Killer Confusor is like, fuck, this is what my Patreon
He's
subscription's
like,
paying
why the
for.
fuck are they talking about Rocky Horror Picture Show when only one of them has seen it?
Welcome back to the Laser Comb Podcast, the weekly show where we comb through random episodes of classic TV shows with a fine-tooth laser. I am the Siege, one of your hosts.
And I'm NeoCal, your other host.
This is episode 20 of the Laser Comb Podcast. This week, we are continuing on with our January Patreon month theme, where every show we watch a random episode of is chosen by one of our $10 and up patrons. So if you want to get in on that, go to patreon.com/lasercomb. This week, we are going to be talking about episode 3 of Invader Zim, which was chosen by longtime listener, recent patron, our boy Cone Killer Confusor. So big shout out to him. Before we get into that, though, there's a couple IRL, like real world things I wanted to address.
Ew.
Namely, first and foremost, at the date of recording, it is January 21st of 2022. And the sad news came out today that Louis Anderson passed away at the age of 64, I believe.
68, 60, so close to 69.
Oh, 60, 68?
Yeah.
Okay, I was wrong. Anyway, Louis Anderson is
So
known
close.
is known mostly to me as his kind of, and I think this was one of his breakout roles too, was in the John Landis directed Eddie Murphy starring film Coming to America, which is a classic comedy of the 80s. It's a movie I've loved since I was a little kid. Recently got a sequel, direct to Amazon Prime Video. Sequel's not that great, but it is fun seeing all those actors together again. But yeah, Louis Anderson was in. I knew him from that. He also had an animated series on Fox Kids in the
He
90s
sure did,
called
boy.
Life with Louis that I watched.
Where he was a little child, but like also like a 40-year-old version of
Yeah,
himself.
yeah.
Like strange concept. And
so,
I watched it.
Yeah, I watched it too. It wasn't a particularly good show, but it was a show that I, just watched just cause.
Just cause it was on in like a bracket where there was nothing else on, probably.
Yeah, it was on between like, I don't know, like Bobby's World and Freakazoid or something like that.
the kind of odd but not great TV.
Yeah.
2 to 4.
Yeah. So solid 3 out of 5 star shows. But yeah, so I was a little bit bummed out to hear about that. So rest in peace, Louis Anderson.
Yeah.
I thought it was worth
good stand-up.
Good
like, I don't know if you
too.
ever caught it, but he's a good comedian.
I thought it was worth mentioning on this show because well, we talk about a lot of 90s shows on
absolutely.
So
he was hot shit.
And yeah, and I feel like most of our listeners are probably around our age or maybe a little bit younger. So a lot of them probably remember Life with Louis. So yeah, rest in peace, Louis Anderson. Another death that I wanted to bring up. This one's a little kind of sort of more personal, but it does relate to this show a little bit. I've talked before about the fact that I've been listening to a podcast called Sick and Wrong since 2013. I'm wearing their shirt right now, which the main host of that show sent me in the mail for being a Patreon subscriber. We had current co-host Kate Rambo from the Sick and Wrong podcast on an episode of this show. Her predecessor was a guy named Harrison. Really funny guy. We were friends on Facebook. We followed each other on Instagram. I chatted with the guy here periodically on Discord. And I listened to him on the Sick and Wrong podcast for like close to 5 years.
Yeah, years and years.
It came out recently, and I actually found out about this about a day before the official announcement came out through certain channels. Yeah, he passed away. And I found out about that like first thing in the morning, like right when I first got to work on my Monday. And I was like, oh, what a gut punch way to start the week off.
Yeah.
So I was legitimately bummed out by that. Maybe a little bit more than I should have been, but it's I don't know. It's a weird thing when you listen to someone you don't like really like know personally. Like I never met the guy. Um, but someone you listen to on a podcast for several years and then even beyond that like actually get to interact with them through like social media and stuff and like Discord. I don't know, it's just it's kind of sort of like a friend dying even though it isn't
It's
quite.
it's people that are very familiar with artists or actors or podcasters or whatever. You feel like you know them and they're important to you, even if they don't know you or you're not personally close with them, because they did influence your life in the form of entertainment.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I used to criticize that, like, man, why is everybody so up in arms when this person died or this celebrity died or whatever? And then David Bowie died. And I'm like, okay. That was like one of the first Robin Williams and David Bowie. Those were the couple of the first where I was like, oh, this person can't make more things. Like they can't make more art. Like I was never going to meet them, but like they're done. So I understand that. I don't judge people when, like, you know, certain people pass away that are in like the spotlight or they feel they're close to even when they weren't their friends, because, you know, all of our memories are just what we consume with friends, family, entertainment, movies, and that kind of thing like that. And it hits you. And you were a little bit more personally connected to that because you actually even if distantly acquaintances. Yeah. I'd say that's the right word. So yeah, my hat's off to him and his family, and of course like all of his fans with the podcast, because he was there from day one, right?
No, he was the second co-host of that
Oh no,
show.
right. Yeah, he's the second co-host, and he had a run there.
Yeah,
and then when he quit, it was when Kate came on. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and it was during that like interim period where I actually guest hosted an episode of that podcast. So
yeah, that interim. Yeah, exactly. I can't remember how that came about, but that was fun one to listen to.
That was actually the main host of that show. D was he was just getting like friends of his. He had a couple of like random people. Some of them were better than others. Most of them are terrible, to be honest. But I reached out and was like, hey, like I've been doing podcasting myself for you know, a few months now. So, and I actually like have like a decent like microphone, because most of the people he would have on the show just sounded like shit. I'm like, I actually have a decent microphone, so and I've been listening to the show for like years and years and years. So, uh, I'll throw my hat into the pile. And he's like, yeah, man, sure, I'll have you if you're free this weekend. I'll have you on the show. And I've done like some Patreon stuff with them, and they play calls of mine quite frequently on the show.
For years they've been playing calls. You're active on the Discord.
Yeah. So, so Harrison passing away. I don't know exactly how old he was. I think he was in his early or mid 40s. He was a really funny guy. Had a lot of demons, as many of us can relate to, but the cause of death isn't publicly available. Isn't publicly available information. And ultimately it doesn't really matter. So anyway, I'm gonna move on from this. Rest in peace, Harrison. It was good, kind of, sort of knowing you. Anyway, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, this is episode 20 of the LaserCone podcast, and we're covering Cone Killer Confusors Patreon sponsored choice, which is Invader Zim, and we went to numbergenerator.org and landed on episode 3 of Invader Zim. Cal, you are much more familiar with Invader Zim than I am, so tell
I
us,
had
what is
them on
Invader?
DVD.
uh,
I
tell us.
love how there was another celebrity death, but you so don't give a shit about that. You just brushed past that.
Oh yeah, Meatloaf died today too.
Very vocal anti-vaxxer.
Was he? Oh, I had no idea.
Very.
What I did know though, that was in death, a member of Project Mayhem has a name. His name is Robert Paulson.
Yeah.
That's all I know. That's all. Well, I mean, everybody's heard Meatloaf's music here and there, like, but mostly, like, first and foremost, when I think of Meatloaf, what sticks out in my head is his role as Bob in Fight Club, and I think that's true for a lot of people. So, I mean, kudos to him. That was a very iconic role, a very, very iconic performance for him. But yeah, Meatloaf's dead too. Anyway,
I was gonna make a John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt joke because his name is my name too, but I couldn't think of it. It didn't work. It's terrible. I remember him from Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Didn't even know he was in that. I've never seen it.
Am I wrong? Is that not him? I'm gonna look like such an idiot.
He can get sick and wrong, actually. On the Sick and Wrong Discord, the topic of Rocky Horror came up recently, and I was like, I think it was actually because like people were talking about Harrison and were like, oh, Harrison had never seen Rocky Horror, and they're like, oh, how does someone go like into their 40s without ever seeing Rocky Horror? And I'm like, I've never seen it either. I mean, and this is what I said on the Discord. I'm like, to be fair, in my early 20s, I was a creative writing major, and I was hooking up with a lot of theater people, a lot of theater students.
And they just wouldn't shut up about it.
And they just wouldn't shut up, because they were like, they were in that age, like, you know, late teens, early 20s, where like you're fresh in university and you find out about this thing, and it suddenly becomes like the greatest thing ever to you, and you don't shut up. Everybody, I feel like, especially like creative types, like goes through that early in university. Like for me, like I discovered like a slew of like old like dramas that I became like a huge cheerleader for, and became very like smug about the fact that, oh, I like this 4-hour like French art house piece that has like 7 lines of dialogue in it, because the story is conveyed so masterfully through the imagery. Yeah. So it was that age, and like to be fair, like all these theater people that I was involved with were like in that age too. It was just they were about that for Rocky Horror, so they were all like, I was hearing like lines from the thing quoted all the time. I was hearing songs sung all the time. I was into karaoke a lot at that time in my life, and like they would always like fucking sing songs from Rocky Horror at karaoke. So I got so sick of hearing about it all the time, like, that I was like, you know what? I'm not fucking watching this movie. I don't like musicals anyway.
Yeah.
And to this day, I've still never watched it. Although, speaking of Kate Rambo, she has been saying like, you gotta watch it. Gotta watch it, mate. I'm not even gonna try to do her accent.
I'll talk and put my hat on at the same time. It's one of those things where you need to go into it like on your own accord. You don't want to watch it because someone else like threw a viewing party and like made you watch it, or like hassled you enough, because nobody watches media by people nagging you. The worst thing ever is somebody being like, oh, you got to watch this, and then somebody else being like, oh my god, I can't believe you haven't seen this, because you're not gonna fucking watch it.
Yeah.
But what happened is, I can't remember, I was like home, I was either snowed or I was sick or something, and I was like by myself, and it was on like Netflix or some other streaming service, and I'm like, why not? And I watched it, and I'm like, oh,
that's
Meatloaf is in this.
Yeah.
I maintain that he's in it. If
right.
I'm wrong, let me know. He plays like a biker dude that was brought back from the dead, but he's like in the show for like 60 seconds before he died. I don't know.
Well,
it's been a while. Can you tell? I haven't memorized the script.
Well, what I do know is that Bob has bitch tits.
Hey man.
Shout out to Bob out there. His name is Robert Paulson. Anyway, so Invader Zim, Cal, what's Invader Zim all about?
Okay, so here on Laser Comb, 20-30 minutes into the episode, we actually do review a random TV show. And this time it's Invader Zim. Invader Zim was a turn of the millennium cartoon that has a very stylized like character concepts. Everyone is very like all the main characters are kid-sized, and it uses really strong lines and really pointy, angular. Everyone has very notable silhouettes. It is a very notable style. But basically, Zim is an invader that's basically kind of like a failure of his race, and they're like, I don't know, go to the edges of the galaxy and conquer. Oh, what's the easiest planet? Earth. Go, you piece of shit. And they send him off, but he takes it like really seriously, and he wants to impress like Supreme Commander or whatever their Lord Commander or something like that. He wants to impress
big
him.
Head.
the big
giant head.
Incoming message from the big giant head.
Oh fuck, we should cover that show on
it's
this podcast sometime.
And Zim has a robot buddy to help him, and his name is Gur. And he lands on Earth, and he realizes it's not going to just like roll over. He can't just like kick down a king's door, blast him, and be like, I am the ruler now. It's complicated. We live in a society. There's multiple rulers. They have weapons. They're more organized than he thought. So he sets up a house in a little suburb, and very badly disguises that he's an alien. And one of his neighbors, a neighbor kid, here, let me actually, because I can't remember all of the characters' name. Invader Zim. It's been years and years since I've watched this. Here we go. There we go. Perfect. The neighbor kid immediately knows that he is an alien.
Right. Yeah, I kind of picked that up I kind of picked that up from this episode. And one thing that I did kind of chuckle about in this particular episode is there's a bit where it's very obvious that Zim is an alien because like his robot parents that he creates like fly him away. And the one kid who realizes that Zim is an alien sees this, and he looks and he's like, let me guess. No one saw that, right? And he looks around, and like all the adults are like face the other way.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's kind of funny.
It's an ongoing gag that like people are so involved with their own like bullshit and life and distractions and stuff that like nobody can see that he's quite clearly not a person. Hell, even his disguise, like his skin is still green. He wears contacts so that his like red eyes like don't stand out, but like his robot friend dresses in this like puppy dog onesie. Gur is very cute. So he's like
it is kind of cute.
Dog robot like 90% of the time.
I knew so many goth chicks in the 2000s who had Gur tattoos. I didn't even know what the character's name was or what it was from. I just recognized it.
The little dog,
like yeah.
So did I.
I knew. Yeah,
I have a couple friends with Invader Zim tattoos. Yeah. And you know what? It's styled with its very heavy lines. I like it. The silhouettes are very definitive. I really like character, and design, and I think they did a really good job of doing
one
that
thing
on
that
this
kind of
show.
one thing that kind of surprised me in my research, because I did do a little bit of research about the show
Yeah.
before we started recording, that Invader Zim was created by Yonan Vasquez, who kind of made a name for himself for the indie comic in the 90s, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, which, if you're watching the video version, the art behind me is art from Johnny the Homicidal
Oh,
Maniac. That was a comic book that I never actually read it, but I read comics in the 90s. I also read Wizard magazine. So if anyone
hell
remembers
yeah.
that, shout out to you.
High five.
Wizard magazine was dope.
I have like 30.
But yeah, I was reading Wizard magazine all the time, and I was reading it around the time that Johnny the Homicidal Maniac was like really new and hype, so Wizard was talking about it a lot. So I never read it, but I was very aware of its existence.
Mm.
So to find
Well, it
out that
looks
the
cool.
guy who created that and did the art for that created this, I was like, oh, that's an interesting connection. And when you see his art, when you see Johnny the
I'm looking at
Homicidal
some of it
Maniac
now.
uh, paired up with Invader Zim, it's like, oh yeah, I totally, this is definitely the same creator.
It's very
So
yeah, it's cleaned up, but definitely the same artist. Yeah. So sorry, the almighty tallest are the leaders of his race.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
They have names like almighty tallest red and almighty tallest pink or purple. Yeah. So they're the leaders. And yeah, whenever he like gets a call from them, they're like, hello, Zim. What is it? Or like, it's time for your annual report. And they just kind of like don't want to deal with him.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah,
It takes like a really mundane job just like more seriously than he ought to, which is kind of a comedy trope.
it is. Yeah. And those, some of the better episodes. But speaking of the episodes, yeah, it's basically like Dib and Gaz are brother and sister, and their dad is always away. He always communicates with them via like a Zoom call, like tablet, or like drone with a monitor on it or something like that. And he's off doing mad scientist things. Membrane, Professor Membrane.
Oh, okay.
And he's got like the same hair as Dab. Yeah, and it's Dab's mission to thwart Zim. And Zim, at first, you know, they're always trying to ridicule and tear each other down. And in the episode that we are watching, it's one of those ones where it's kind of like two little episodes in a greater half-hour block.
Right.
And the ones we're reviewing are Parent Teacher Night and Walk of Doom.
Yeah, Parent Teacher Night is the first one, and that episode opens in a classroom. Zim is at school, and basically his teacher, who is really horrible. I would just like to point out.
Yeah.
Like shockingly so. I mean, that's the point, but
Miss Bitters.
yeah, she's really awful. Miss Bitters.
Yeah, it starts
yes.
She wisps around like a weird shadow creature. Like there's this shadowy like arc, and she just like appears.
Okay,
and
so,
I'm like,
yeah,
I get that.
That
it's not just you imagining it.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I'm like, I did do a double take. I'm like, wait, is she like some kind of supernatural creature that I'm just not aware of?
She's just an ancient teacher who has taught your parents and your parents' parents. It's nebulous, like how many centuries old she is.
Well, and indeed, when the parent teacher thing happens later on in the episode, and all the parents are there, she even says to them, she was like something to the effect of, "I always knew none of you would amount to anything, and I was right."
And I was right. Which is like leads the viewer to believe that all of them were in her class.
Were former students. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's an elementary school teacher, which means they've all grown up, become adults, and had kids, and those kids are in her class. So she's up there in age.
I gotta tell you, I would go out of my way to make sure my child was not in her class, especially having dealt with her firsthand. I'm like, no, we'll move to another city if we have to.
Some people become nicer, more compassionate, forgiving with age. This lady, she's 94. She has pure concentrated hate that's keeping her alive somehow. Dark Sith energy that's maintaining her will to live.
Right.
One thing I'd like to point out about the art style is it does have a reminiscent turn of the millennium thing where like every character is bad looking in a different way. It's so stylized that all the characters either have funky teeth, eyes, weird shaped heads.
Oh yeah,
squares.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah,
rounded. Everyone is shaped differently. Some people are shaped like boxes. Some people are a toothpick. It's like, all very chaotic and ugly. But because all the characters are ugly, it fits the style.
It's like a goth, more macabre version of Hey Arnold.
That is, yeah.
Because if you think about
like that, this is like gritty, gothic, urban gothic. Hey Arnold, yeah.
Yeah, because what you were talking about like all the characters having some each having a different unique weird characteristic about them. That was very Hey Arnold. I'm sure Hey Arnold wasn't the first cartoon to do that, but that's the first one that really sticks out in my head when I think about it. I guess you could say that about Ren and Stimpy too, probably.
Ren and Stimpy, or almost any
Rocko's
of the
Modern
90s
Life.
kind of modern, yeah. Rocko's Modern Life, they were animals, so they had a greater freedom to throw that around. Yeah. And one thing at the beginning of Parent Teacher Night is Zim. The teacher, Miss Bitters, is like, oh, I expect to see your parents here. And here's the thing, Miss Bitters is skeptical and seems to be the only one who almost understands that Zim is an alien. And so Dib is constantly trying to poke fun at. I kind of like their rivalry. I really like that. It's more like a kid's rivalry, but the way they think of it, it's this super genius alien invader versus the smartest human of them all. But they're just kids. which I kind of like this mundane shit, like him trying to get him in trouble with his teacher when he's trying to invade the planet. I do kind of really appreciate that. And the art style is the setting is weird and nebulous because it feels like late 90s, but everything, including the teacher's PC and laptop, it's kind of bulky sci-fi. All the tech in it is kind of industrial. The computer is very looks like you could smash the tower onto the ground and it would be fine. Everything has its own kind of, oh, this feels like the late 90s, but the skyscrapers are kind of futuristic, right? So it has this kind of weird nebulous semi-futurism that I really like, that I'll try to point out here or there as we're reviewing it.
It gives it kind of it gives the setting kind of an otherworldly quality.
Yeah, this is supposed when he went here, they sent him here to die, I think. A 6-month trek across the galaxy to a mystery planet, but the mystery planet was Earth. Yeah. So it's oh, there is an inhabited planet there? Weird. Zim is I would never agree to bring my parents here. And for some reason, Miss Bitters has a micro disc, and she plays it, and there's camera footage of her being Zim, are you gonna bring your parents to Parent Teacher Night? And he's yeah, whatever. And then after she plays that for him, Zim is why did you record that? And then the scene,
It's a fair question.
Yeah, so it's little subtle humor like that made me go, okay, I remember why I liked the show. Yeah, and
speaking of the
Deb,
humor,
go ahead.
speaking of the humor, watching this show, I had seen it once before, back in like 2011
Yeah.
or so. I mentioned, I think I mentioned somewhere, maybe it was on last week's episode, but I had mentioned that I was in a roommate situation with people I didn't really like particularly much and didn't want to
Yeah.
live with, and they were watching it, so I was like, and I didn't like the show, so I watched like one or two episodes and moved on. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's and I haven't watched it since. And I was like, oh, maybe that's the reason why I didn't like the show. But in regards to the humor, watching this today made a lot of things click for me, because I knew in the 2000s so many people, especially women,
Mm-hmm.
whose sense of humor was very in
Whose sense of humor
line
was
with the show.
OMG, I'm
Was
so
Gur.
random. Like just
Whose
ask all
sense
of
of
my
humor
friends. They all say I'm random.
whose sense of humor was Gur.
Yeah.
Basically, the character Gur. Yeah,
Yeah.
I knew so many people like who would deliver like jokes and like say the kind of make the kind of like dubious comments that Gurr does in this show. And I'm like, so basically in the 2000s, I knew a lot of people who liked Invader Zim and just didn't realize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how I feel about the humor on this now versus when I was younger. It was more palatable then, just binge watching episode to episode, right? And taking it with a grain of salt. And I'm doing that now too, but you know, preferences and humor like change, and I'm like, oh wow, this is a lot more random than than I remember. I find the types of people that really liked this at the time equally insufferable, because instead of actually talking about the show, instead of instead of actually talking about the show, I almost delivered that line without laughing. um we lost Siege for a moment there. Because instead of talking about the show, they would just spew lines from the show back at each other, but almost like a mating ritual. Grr, why is there bacon in the soap? I made it myself. And that was the humor and how random it was. Archer fans do
you have
that
talked
now.
about I was gonna say, you have talked about on I think it was on a preamble a few months back. You talked about how that's how Archer fans and
Do
you
that
are.
now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they'll just like, oh, you're an Archer fan too, Lana, and just like quote,
you want ants? This is how you get ants.
This is how you get ants. And then they quote, and then someone else comes into the conversation, and then they say the ants thing again. And yeah, I've told you a nightmare scenario where I was surrounded by Archer fans. Yeah, I'll go into that a different time.
Disclaimer, listeners, I actually do like Archer.
But for me,
so the show don't at me for that.
Yeah, but for me, the show was ruined just like this was ruined by Invader Zim fans being insufferable. Your roommates. And so when I tried to get into
that's the thing. It's like I didn't even realize that like all this shit that like everyone I knew were all these like jokes and random comments people were making around me. I didn't know that it was from Invader Zim. Yeah. That's what I mean. Like watching this, like it just unlocked like so like it just made a whole bunch of things from my past click. I'm like, right. So this is where like half the people I knew in the 2000s were getting their material from, was this show.
Moose in a room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, I know how you feel. You could have liked it, but it didn't come around. And I'm like that with Archer. I could have liked it, but unfortunately, a whole bunch of neckbeards at a party I went to think it's prime comedy to get around in a circle and just quote the show for 10, 20, 30 minutes. Don't make actual jokes or talk about the episodes. Just quote it.
How many times can you say danger zone over and over?
Let me tell you, dozens of times. Yeah. So
what I also with the danger zone thing,
what I get into
what I also noticed with the danger zone thing and Archer is there are actually quite a fair number of people out there who don't realize that song is from Top Gun and just think it's a joke from Archer.
Really?
I Archer's heyday, which is long past, actually. Like, I feel like Archer is kind of passe now at this point. I don't know. Yeah. I'm getting old. I don't know what the current thing is. Like, all the, like, dorks out there quote.
I'm old. Right what now. Are they quoting? Pickle Rick? Something about a scientist being turned into a pickle?
Rick and Morty is probably a prime candidate.
Is there anything funnier than Pickle Rick?
I'm gonna go, and we'll get back to talking about Invader Zim in a second here, but I'm gonna go on record and say I don't like Rick and Morty. I watched at someone's house. They were like going through an entire season on DVD. This is back in like 2016, and people still actually had DVDs. They were going through an entire season, and I was at their house and I sat down and watched, I think, like maybe 4 episodes, and no, you know how many people on like the internet told me it's just because I'm not intelligent enough to understand the humor of the show, and I'm like, really, that's where you're going?
Which is the same reason I could never get into Big Bang Theory. I'm just not smart enough or geeky enough to understand all those sweet, dank memes and their intelligent humor jokes.
I'm not smart enough or geeky enough to understand all of these jokes written by a boomer who clearly isn't a geek.
Morty, you're just not smart enough to understand the quantum. Morty, I'm an alcoholic. Laugh at me, Morty. Yeah, you're not smart enough to understand their advanced humor, like shoving football-sized seeds up your ass. And I'm just gonna leave it there.
I know that is like top tier, like highbrow shit right there.
Yeah,
that is the comedy of intellectuals. Let me tell you,
it is. It goes Big Bang Theory, Rick and Morty. What else we got there? What's the intelligent cartoons there?
Quote unquote intelligent. I don't know.
What do we got? Let us know what else you need to be smart to watch. No, I make fun of both of those shows. I make fun of this show. I make fun of Archer or whatever, but it's not like they're bad at all. Like I've watched like season 1 and 2 of Rick and Morty. I've watched season 1 of Archer. I've watched all of Invader Zim, and obviously I wouldn't keep watching it if there weren't funny parts in this.
Yeah, I've actually on the subject of Archer, I think I might be a season or 2 behind, but I've actually watched, I think, up to like all the way up to like season 9 or something like that. So so I'm not shit talking Archer. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it was season 1. There was one time a joke. I can't remember. He's trying to kill some like dude who's like banging his mom at the end of season 1. And he makes like an observation or a joke, and he's like, really? Like, I can't remember, something about like his mom still doing something for him or something like that or whatever. And there was one joke in there where I was like, huh. And that's why I didn't keep watching. All of season 1, it made me go, huh, one time. And so
that's kind of where I'm at with this episode of Invader Zim that I watched. There are a couple moments here and there where I'm like, huh.
Yeah.
There was one part where I actually did laugh out loud. I'll just say what it is now.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
When they're at the parent-teacher conference, to speed like really quickly ahead.
Yeah, let's speed run it. He tries to reprogram his robot parents to come to parent-teacher night.
to come to parent teacher night, and
Gurr,
he does that by making them watch TV, specifically commercials by the looks of it.
well, he does that by he's like, Gurr, you're not allowed to watch TV. We can't just reprogram them. They need to learn like with AI. They need to learn naturally. So I'm going to put in this like micro CD of like how to parent properly. And then I'm just going to go in a different room. And immediately, because Gurr has like massive ADHD energy, he starts falling asleep, and he's like, and he immediately starts turning on like the 8 televisions that are aimed at his parents, who, by the way, like A Clockwork Orange, have their eyes peeled open with like, they're robots, by the way. I don't know why he needs to do this, but he has their eyes
I was
peeled
thinking
open.
that,
yeah. So forcing them to watch. And Gurr quickly just turns it to like absolute, not even television, but like infomercial channels.
Yeah,
like a channel where there's just an ugly, scary monkey like staring at you. Ugh.
They're one of the things that they watch is this guy is sitting at a table and he's like, I like burritos, but they sure don't like me. And then the word diarrhea just explodes on the screen.
In like blood red. Yeah. But they sure don't like me.
That was one of the moments that I had.
Yeah.
That mildly amused me. So that happens. The robots get up. And the robots have like this weird like they're robots, but they almost have this weird like almost like shambly like supernatural quality to them, and like the way they move. I started actually getting on the show's wavelength here with like the like kind of like with the music that's playing in the background and the robots being like almost like Japanese horror-esque. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
this is where I started actually like kind of digging the show, is the stuff with the robots. And so the part that actually made me laugh really out loud is the robots come to the Zim brings them to
parent teacher night.
to parent teacher night, and the robots are like awkwardly like interacting with people in this like really bizarre way. Again, like I actually like all the stuff that's going on in this scene.
They are clearly robots.
They're clearly robots.
Like they have clamps, like from Bender clamps from Futurama as like hands, and they have exposed circuitry, and they're on wheels. They don't even
and
walk.
Periodically they just like start shorting out, like they've like consumed too much energon or something like that.
And yet
the dad robot gets his arm ripped off at one point. And he's
Zim tries to cover it off by being like, "Oh no, that's an artificial limb. He lost in the war."
The war, and the dad robot is like, "That was my squeezing arm." No, why my squeezing arm? Why did they take my squeezing arm? Like,
they took my squeezing arm.
That made me laugh.
That was good. And Dib and his sister Gaz. Dib and Gaz's dad, like again, like I said, he's never actually physically present in all of the episodes. Flying like drone.
The girl's name is Gaz?
Yeah.
Oh. Gaz is usually a male name.
Oh, is that a real name?
Yeah, it's a nickname for Gary.
What?
Yeah.
As a boy's name is of Old English origin, and the meaning of Gaz is spear, an informal pet name of Gary.
Yeah, it's not, you don't really see it here, but it's a fairly common name in the UK. Today I
learned.
I actually had a pet cat in the late 2000s named Gaz.
Holy moly, there is a lot of fan art of her. Which is weird, because isn't she 10?
I was going to say, isn't this character a child?
A lot of it is innocent, but a lot of it is of her older.
Perhaps we should maybe climb out of this rabbit hole
before
we get too far.
Bail.
Eject.
And Gaz knows that Zim is like an alien, but kind of doesn't care.
Mm.
Luckily, they stray away from it doesn't showcase her much in this episode. She's just the side character. They stray away from her.
I didn't even pick up on her. Like, to me, she was just a background character. Like, if you hadn't mentioned her, I wouldn't have thought anything of it.
That's fair, because she just kind of walks in alongside Dib.
Yeah.
And their hovering drone iPad dad.
Yeah, she could have been an extra for all I know.
Yeah, but when it does showcase her a bit, luckily they do give her some personality and make her interesting. Besides, like, the sister annoyed with her brother, and besides the uncaring goth girl, aka Daria. There's so many Daria like goth like characters in cartoons and media that they did that to death. So I'm glad
Yeah, you mean like the comic strip / cartoon character Daria?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't she originate on Beavis and Butthead?
I thought it was a comic strip originally.
Was it a comic strip? Maybe I'm just. Oh, sorry. It's King of the Hill. It's Hank Hill that was on Beavis and Butthead.
I'm gonna do some legitimate journalism here.
Okay, well, he's journalizing him. Very quickly, things spiral out of control at the parent-teacher conference, and
oh no, you're right. It's a spin-off of It's a spin-off of Beavis and Butthead. I don't know why I thought it was based on a comic strip.
Daria and Hank Hill were characters in Beavis and Butthead. Weird, huh?
Apparently, there is a new Daria series in the works, because streaming services are bringing everything back. God damn it!
Yeah, so there were different runs of different like female archetypes, and you had the Darias, and then you had the Gurs.
Right.
Like you said, as you were watching this, you're like, wait a second, hold on. That explains a lot of people's behavior.
that explains a lot of people that I knew in the 2000s. Like, the way they behaved, the kinds of things they said, the kinds of jokes they made, the way they delivered lines. I'm like, wow, this character Gur reminds me of like 20 different chicks I knew in my early university days.
Oddly enough, still friends with her. The friend I had with tattoos from the show never quoted it. Wasn't annoying at all. Well, acknowledged that, she liked the show, and that's about it. Moved on. So the parents' design is really interesting. They're dressed.
I think I know who you're talking about, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. The parents are dressed like muggles from Harry Potter. Like, his mom's wearing overalls, like dishwashing gloves, and a tutu. And she attacks some lady by trying to poke her. So eventually, Gur's like, how do I trick my robot parents to getting the hell out of here before I get busted? One of them's missing an arm. Another one attacked a lady. I'm gonna cry and complain about my spine, because he remembers there was a stupid commercial for painkillers about his spine.
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, that happened early on in the episode. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was actually a moment for me where I was like, what have I gotten myself into watching this?
Yeah, there's an infomercial where a guy's spine, it zooms in like a Mortal Kombat X-ray, slow-mo X-ray, and shows a dude's spine just simultaneously shatter when he's watching. And he goes, my spine. And it zooms in as he's agonizingly is dying on the sidewalk. And it's like, painkillers.
Yeah.
And so he uses that to his advantage, because he knows that Gur accidentally trained them on these commercials. And so he pretends he broke his spine. And they're like, we'll take you home, sweetie. And jetpacks come replace their wheels. They grab him and they jetpack and smash through the windows and leave. And that's the part where you were saying, where Dib is like, oh my God, see, they're robots. They're alien robots. Let me guess. Not a single person watched it, did they?
Right. Yeah.
And he goes, "Ugh," and he gets angry and he throws his punch on the ground. And person turns and he's like, "Did you just waste punch?" And they all turn around like in this weird horror meme thing, and like the camera like cuts away to presumably the mob like freaking out at him. And it reminds me of those like memes where it shows like a sleeping person and it's like teachers when like, you know, their students are getting bullied, and then it shows like somebody waking up and getting angry or like having like red eyes, and it's like teachers when the bullied student fights back. Or
Right.
it's like society when like billionaires like cheat on their taxes, and it shows someone sleeping, and it shows somebody like freaking out, and it's like society when someone cheats at Monopoly. It's like that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the gist of
The
parent teacher night.
Yeah, the first part. Each of them is almost exactly like 12 minutes and 15 seconds in length.
Yeah. I just realized that they have normal human things in their house, in their front house to trick people. And there's just a poster with like somebody drooling that says, "I eat food." Just little humorous stuff like that. I really like how there are kind of no straight lines in this. Everything's bendy and wavy and at an angle, or the what's it called, forced perspective makes everything elongated. It's very stylish, and I think one of the better looking animated TV shows of its time, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you look at current animation now, which is very flat. Like the story might be better, the character design might be cleaner or whatever, but it's jarring to go from characters just standing still, like talking at each other, and then a cut of their face and a cut of their face. And then you go back and you look at how dynamic the camera is of Invader Zim and how it moves around and everything's always moving, and it's showcasing the environment at all times, and there's always action going on. It's a lot better than things of like the last like 10 years, and I actually want to give it credit for that, whether or not the humor or the ugly animation like style is your thing. It does a lot of things really really nicely. So shout out to the art team and the animation team.
Yeah, there's I can see why like I mentioned, like I knew so many like goth chicks in the 2000s who had tattoos from the show. Like I can see why. Like the show has this like kind of macabre quality to it that
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would definitely appeal to.
We've been on a macabre or like urban gothic adjacent like streak so far, like Ruby Gloom. They don't act like they're all undead like weird creatures, but they're all Frankensteins and
Well,
like
so far this month we've gone from X-Files,
yeah.
which is kind of a dark show like involving aliens. Uh, Although that was a semi lighthearted episode that we watched.
Yeah.
Um, to Ruby Gloom, which is this like kind of cutesy goth like type series, and now we're on to this show, which is like goth macabre like sci-fi.
Industrial goth, or I don't know how to describe it, style. Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, like I feel like this show was made by people who probably like listened to like Ministry and Skinny Puppy and KMFDM and in the 90s.
Yeah, that's actually the first thing that like popped up into my head, or and watched the Addams Family and
Liked Beetlejuice. I mean, who doesn't like Beetlejuice?
doesn't
But
like Beetlejuice. Yeah. And yeah, I'm appreciative
really
of all
really
of
likes
those.
Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, I really like Edward Scissorhands.
Well,
Don't you dare fucking say anything bad about Edward
you also
Scissorhands.
really liked this show too, so you're kind of proving my point.
The point is there's an audience. Yeah.
My point is like they're like what I'm trying to say is like I get a vibe from this show that I can kind of like kind of associate, like I can figure out like what people involved in this show were into or influenced by.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Yeah.
For sure. So the second part of episode 3 is called Walk of Doom.
Doom.
Which so Doom is a big theme on the show because Zim thinks everything is the most hardcore mission ever. And there's a kind of humorous beauty in that he can't even go for a walk without it seeming like he's investigating the society of like the chaos of human life. But he's just going for a walk with his dog and he almost dies like 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly he's in no position to conquer the earth, which is again like part of the humor of the show.
Yeah, so he makes this this chip for Gur that like basically upgrades his GPS.
I like how it's this advanced sci-fi, but it's just a 90s it's a 90s GPS.
It's just a 90s GPS. I also like the fact that he's like, Gur, locate blah blah, and all Gur does is just point in a general direction every time.
Yeah, he's like, Gur, excellent. Locate home, HQ.
And Gur just points.
As if it's advanced technology, yeah.
Yeah, that was another like, moment for me watching this.
One thing about the setting is this came out in a very unique era where computers were common, but smartphones were not.
Well, smartphones didn't exist at this point.
So, like, when did the 2005, 6, 7? When did the first iPhone?
Well, this was 2001. The first iPhone came out in 2008.
4? 5? 8? Holy moly! Wow. Yeah, I graduated 2005. Yeah, okay.
Blackberries were already around. Well, not
Palm Pilot. Yeah,
Palm Pilot.
Yeah.
The T-Mobile.
We were getting there.
The T-Mobile Sidekick, like so, like phones that had like computerized functionality.
You could technically take video with some of them.
Yeah, like they were starting to pop up around this time, but we didn't get something advanced like what we know as the modern smartphone until like the late 2000s. So after this show's time. It's kind of wild to think about it, like with how ubiquitous smartphones are with like just about everyone's day-to-day life now, to think that like they've really only been around for like 15 years.
That's why I always push back the timer, because I'd be like, when was the first one? 2007? When was the first one? 2005? And it keeps feeling like older and older, but like, yeah, I just Googled it and it's like first released 2007, June 29th. But that's first releases, right? Like that's not them fixing it. That's not remodeling it. That's
the original iPhone.
Yeah. The original brick phone.
I didn't even I think I first took notice of the iPhone when the second model came out, which was the iPhone 3G. That's probably why I was thinking 2008.
At the time, for like 5 years, like till like 2012, hell, maybe like older than that, I was like, oh man, people spending hundreds, like up to $1,000 on these things, and then like the next year they get another one. I'm like, no thanks, what do I even need that for? I have a computer.
Yeah.
For years, it's like, why do I need this? I have a computer. Why do I need this?
I was like that for a while. I didn't get an iPhone until my first smartphone was an iPhone 4S, right when they first came out in 2011. And here I am 11 years later, and I still have an iPhone. Not the same one, however.
It's invisible!
There we go.
It says I got my vaccine!
Yep. I did get my vaccine. I have 2 of them. And in fact, actually, little bit of an announcement. Whatever, I'll just say it now. Next week's episodes may or may not come out on time because I'm getting my 3rd shot about 2 hours before we are set to record next week's episode of the LaserComb podcast. So it may or may not happen. We did record an episode of Alphanumeric, our reboot podcast, 6 months ago, shortly after I got my 2nd shot. And, well, I was kind of falling apart by the end there. And in fact, I ended up passing out after we stopped recording and basically slept for 2 days. So,
Nice.
so just keep that in mind. Next week's episodes might be the week after.
Yeah. So, also shout out to Invader Zim and its music. It has this like heavy semi-industrial kind of like setting the vibe for like danger or something like that music during this walk. And by the way, for some reason, Invader Zim is dressed like a homeless dude with a fisherman's hat. I I don't know why, and a backpack, walking his dog. By the way, he's walking his dog, but he's walking on two legs. Gur always walks on two legs, not on all fours. Nobody
Yeah.
questions it. There's something weirdly reminiscent about the art style as he's walking around town. And I can't place it. I can't place what else this reminds me of. And I'll
Speaking of the music, I just want to point out that the guy who does the music did the music for many of the bajillion Land Before Time sequels.
no way. Good for you, dude.
He's done a lot. Most of it's stuff I've never heard of, but like, looks like he did the sequel, all of those. He did the sequel to uh, one of the sequels to An American Tail, not Feifel Goes West.
Oh,
Um, he hasn't done any work in a few years now, so maybe he's retired. Oh well.
yeah, maybe.
Anyway,
But yeah, everything's weird to him. There are windows with people behind them doing strange things, like taking things from them, and he's walking around just keeping his like distance and observing the mundane, ugly, like dirty lives of them. A chihuahua glitches through the matrix. I'm not sure what's up with that. He looks at a chihuahua, and maybe it is just supposed to represent it twitching weird, but it looks like it has a glitch in the matrix, and he gets freaked out and he goes through a park, and there's a whole bunch of like performers going through the park, and one of them is just like a dude like doing what's it called, human robot or whatever.
right. Oh, there was there was a guy doing the moonwalk.
Yeah, moonwalking and stuff. Yeah, and they just, like you said, they need to go home, and the GPS isn't working.
Yeah, because
so
we find out that Gur didn't bring it, and this becomes a recurring joke throughout the episode that Gur doesn't have a thing that they need because he's storing some sort of food there instead.
Yeah, because he's like, why did you take out the GPS chip? And he's like, to make room for my cupcakes. And he eats a cupcake. And it's a very recurring thing that like he's very random. Where he loves food and treats and stuff like that.
And he eats the cupcake. And this was another moment where I'm like, fuck, I knew so many people who would say shit like this. He eats the cupcake and he's holding the wrapper and he's like, oh, I miss my cupcake.
And he starts crying.
And I'm like, oh, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, his mood is very up and down.
No, I just like, I was saying, like, I knew tons of people unknowingly that they were just like borrowing their sense of humor from this show, but I knew tons of people in the 2000s and like even into the 2010s who would like
really
basically act like Gur.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think maybe I knew like one or two. Yeah, so they figure out a way to get back.
What can I say? I attract a type, I guess.
Yeah. I guess it's this type. And so he gets on some sort of public transit like vehicle where a lady tells him that he has to pay. And he's like, why? In a very dramatic fashion, he's like, why would I pay to like sit on this death trap?
Yeah, this like this filthy mechanical death trap or whatever. And so he gets kicked off the bus and he's like, oh, well, they need money to get home. And he comes up with the idea of they end up like sleeping. Or what does he do? He's like, oh, I'm going to locate the,
They do spend the night.
Well,
in
they
the
do.
streets.
They do, yeah. And he's like, I'm gonna locate home by just by staring up at the sun because the sun always sets in the west, and he ends up like burning his eyes.
I liked this because he's like, we'll use the sun to get back, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense because it rises in the east and sets in the west. But he
Right.
takes that literally, and like you said, he just stares at the sun, and some body horror pops up. The show can be gross at times. We're not talking about like Ren and Stimpy gross, but like we see his eyes start to like steam, and then like
They're like cauterized.
turn
It,
into black boils.
yeah, his eye. It's like his eyes burned and the wounds were cauterized from the heat. Um,
It's
and he's like, ah, I'm blind. Oh, I'll just wait until my eyes regenerate because I guess he has regenerative abilities. So they
yeah,
end
I
up
was like, oof.
so they end up sleeping in the streets, and then his eyes do regenerate.
I know, I was surprised. I was like, oh, we can't do that.
His eyes do regenerate, and some guy is like walking by them, and they look like a couple of bums, and this guy is like, "Oh, get a job, bum," and he's like, "Oh yes, that's what I will do to make money, so we can take the bus to get home." Um,
And they go through like a town square where like a dozen people are like busking.
yeah,
There's one guy, his face is covered in bees. There's another guy who's like literally swallowing a snake. Someone's playing music. There's a homeless doomsayer who's just screaming at the top of his lungs. There's like a break dancer. And then there's Zim and Gur very badly dancing. Like the worst robot that you've ever seen.
speaking of bees, to rewind a little bit, the another like
Oh,
moment I had in this episode was when uh Zim is like putting this like GPS chip into
right.
Gurr. He opens his head up and he pulls this like bee's nest out
Yep.
of it and like puts it up this chute, and Gurr is just like, my bees.
My bees. Yeah,
That
it's
that that made me chuckle a little
little
bit.
little subtle things like that are the it's when the show is subtly funny like that that it's its best, and when it's overtly random at its worst.
Yeah, see, like the kind of humor that I appreciate is like little like subtleties and nuance.
Yeah, because
Um,
it tells you a story. It's just like, what do you how long have you had those bees? Well,
yeah.
why were you attached to them?
Um, And so like subtle deliveries like often will be the jokes that like really stick out in my head. Um in anything really, but like the kind of like screaming like humor that permeates a lot of like, as you call it, lol so random type cartoons, it doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, the lol random type of humor.
Yeah.
It's not very bad to me. Do you know what I mean? I'm a little older and I'm a little over that type of humor and blah blah blah. But like the show is enjoyable. Like I can keep watching this.
Yeah,
Uh, so
yeah, yeah.
so so what happens here? He makes a bunch of money. There's a dude that kind of looks like the human version of him. He's got the same hat, like a beard, right? A little dude comes over and drops a wad of cash in his hat, smirking, and I'm like, that's weird. Does he just like him? He's like, wow, I like this guy's style. We find
May
out later that this
I,
guy robbed a bank, and those are probably marked bills or something, right?
oh, I
Um,
completely missed that.
yeah, yeah, and
I was gonna say, oh, maybe he's just another alien or something.
oh no, it's just a dude that Zim's outfit happens to look like.
Oh, yeah.
And he comes in, he drops all of the money in the bus exchange, like all of it, including the wad of cash. Why does he need money, right? To get on the bus. And the bus scene is humorous. I think that's the funniest moment of the episode because
See,
there's this weird. Go ahead.
I didn't find this funny at all.
Oh,
I this was this was horror to me. Um,
that's what I meant by funny to me
I,
is the horror of it.
this is utter horror. And listeners, I have a thing called misophonia, which is basically it's anxiety and anger in response to like certain audio stimuli. Like
this is it.
Like whistling, people chewing. I can't stand the sound of people eating. I hate whistling. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know this was actually a thing, and then I found out some time ago that this is actually a condition called misophonia, and I'm
Was
like,
it a listener? Didn't somebody like make a comment? Or
I found out about it actually because Kate Rambo from Sick and Wrong was talking about it.
That's what it was. Yeah,
because she suffers from the same thing, and I'm like, holy, and she was like talking about it, and so I started researching the condition, and I'm like, holy shit, this is me to a T. Like even right down, because I've always hated listening to people eat and chew and whatnot, and it just fills me with like such discomfort, like to the point that I just want to like leap over the table and like smash their head into it. And like, granted, I'm not going to do that because I know in that situation I'm the asshole, but it's like, but it's just, it fills me with that much like uncomfortable, like discomfort and anger. And I've always hated the sound of people whistling too. It's just so uncomfortable to me. And
so this show is hidden horror elements, is what you're saying.
And so I never knew why. So yeah, anyway, so that's misophonia. And so what's going on with Zim here on the bus? I'm like, this is nightmare. This is nightmarish.
So the camera cuts to Zim and he looks around a little bit like anxious, and he looks at a baby and it's drooling and there's flies buzzing around.
Yeah.
And then there's the sound of the engine, and he looks over and there's somebody else just staring off into oblivion. And there's an old person like staring at him like angrily. And he looks back at Gur, and Gur's pleasant and he smiles, and the flies are buzzing. And he looks outside and somebody's in a taxi, which is like a way more advanced version of a bus. And he looks around and somebody's picking their nose. He looks around and there are people drooling, and there are flies and drooling. There's an angry clown. They're sweating. Someone's crying. Someone's picking their nose. And eventually he absolutely fucking loses his shit.
Yep. I completely understand what Zim is going through here.
Yeah. And he screams because he can't be normal. And he screams, I cannot stay on this bus any longer. And he's off the bus, and it cuts to inside the bus where the sweaty clown was.
I have actually like flipped out and gotten off of buses before because of stuff like that.
And the sweaty clown with a bit of a chicken wing stuck in their hair is like, geez, what a freak.
Yeah.
And what is it? Zim's like, what is wrong with these people? And I'm like, yeah,
fair question.
Welcome to public transit, my dude.
So they end up taking a taxi, and he pays for the cab, and I'm like, you just gave away all your money.
Well, he goes to the bank, right?
Oh, does he?
He goes to the bank because that's where humans get money. And the bank has just been robbed.
I was so okay. So because I missed the guy, the scene you were talking, I don't know how I missed this. Like, I don't know, maybe my girlfriend texted me or something, because I was in the middle of like texting with her while I was watching this. That must be how I missed it. So I missed the whole thing with the guy who looks like him.
Yeah.
So when I was watching this and he goes into the bank and the police are like, that's him, I was very, very, very confused. I'm like, what? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So basically, Zim goes in there. He goes past the caution tape into the police investigation, and a bank teller screams and says that's him.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the head of the police chief or whatever looks at a security cam. It looks like a Polaroid, which is funny because it's like security cam, a black and white picture of a little dwarf. It's a human version of him that gave him some money earlier.
Right.
Didn't cover his face or whatever. And it looks a little bit like this guy. And so, yeah, the police freak out and they chase him. Mm-hmm. And I like that even though he's an alien, like he could pull out a death ray or something, a lot of the time he's very much the victim of the show. He screams and he runs away, and his backpack, as viewers of the entire show realizes, has spider legs to help him get away when he's physically outmatched.
When I was watching this, I was like, wow, he's pulling a Doc Ock here.
Yeah, he's pulling a Doc Ock. Yeah. Without his technology, this guy's useless. Yeah, and this kind of like spider leg thing, it just kind of moves off of his thoughts. Like it just seems to make him better because he almost falls off of the top of the roof, the building that he's running away from.
Right.
Saves his life. Yeah, he pulls a Doc Ock, totally.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, well, now's our time to get away. And he holds on to Gur, and Gur has jetpack. His feet are like little jetpack boosters. And he escapes. But they run out of fuel and fall from the sky and into a dumpster. Luckily, have you ever noticed that no matter what height you fall from, if you fall in a dumpster, it's like falling in a haystack in Assassin's Creed? You're fine. Well, and I'm like, but there are like needles and like sharp metal in dumpsters.
Even in Assassin's Creed, you could leap down like hundreds upon hundreds, even thousands of feet.
It feels like thousands of feet.
But as long as you land on this like little mound of hay, you're perfectly fine.
Everybody knows that as long as you land in at least like a hay barrow, like at least a wagon full of hay, you're fine.
Yeah.
Hay is like this like miraculous like cushion that can cushion any velocity and weight, no matter the how fast it travels.
Yeah.
Terminal velocity.
Yeah, that's the term.
Doesn't matter. You're fine. Haystack has got you. And dumpsters. I know it's a trope, and it's just done because it's a trope at this point. But dumpsters are like that. But I mean, trash isn't full of like teddy bears and pillows. No. Trash is full of like rusty cans and like shards of glass and like old electronics, needles.
I was gonna say needles, like
and so he what happens here? He turns to Gur and he's like, "Why, dude? Your jetpacks are supposed to last a lot longer than that."
Yeah, you should have had way more fuel than that. And he's like, "Oh, I took the fuel out." And he's like, "Well, why?" And he's like, and carrying on the joke from earlier, he's like, "Oh," and he like opens his leg up, and what did he have in there, like tuna or something?
Yeah, he's like, "Why?" And he says very like nonchalantly, like, "To make room for the tuna." God, that reminds, what is that, like a Valley Girl thing? Like that attitude that he has, to make room for the tuna. Gosh. I went Napoleon.
I was gonna say it's kind of Napoleon Dynamite.
I'll do whatever I want. Yeah, and he pulls off his like the bottom of his onesie and sucks.
Another movie that I hated, by the way.
So I mean, like, I really disliked Napoleon Dynamite when it came out. I went and rewatched it again last year. I love it. I don't know what happened. I really liked it.
It's worth revisiting because I've seen it twice back in the 2000s, and I really didn't like it.
I was so vocal about how much I disliked it, and my partner was like, "Well, what if things change? Like, no, you should check it out. It seems like you would really like it." And it's because the same director and writer made Gentlemen Broncos, which is one of my favorite movies.
Never seen it.
And its sense of humor and everything, Sam Rockwell is in it. It just lands so well. And I've never cried at a movie before in my entire life.
Really?
Except for Gentlemen Broncos. I was like actually in tears at the end of it. And maybe it was the type of mood I was in when I was watching it too, but it's the only movie where I've cried. And so I'm like, well, I love Gentlemen Broncos. I'll go back and watch Napoleon Dynamite without any expectations. Yeah, I got it.
All right.
Gentlemen Broncos is better, but I was like, okay, I get it. I like it.
All right.
Just throwing that out there.
I'll consider revisiting it at some point.
Yeah. And speaking of, you know what? This show is just horror for Christopher Siege. Because when he's eating the tuna out of his rocket pack, he makes like sounds. Yeah. And at this point, Invader Zim isn't like, he can't even get angry at him anymore because this is just what Gur's like. He doesn't chastise him. He doesn't like get angry. He's like, okay. And he calls a cab. And I'm with you on this. I remember you were like, how does he have money?
Yeah. How does he have money?
He screams, Quickly to my house, cab driver. I am ready to go home.
He like points. He's like that way. He points to the right, I think.
He points somewhere. And the episode ends with him angrily standing on the side of the road somewhere in Mexico.
Yeah.
And there's like some Invader Zim jams going on. And
I was confused about the fact that like characters were like grooving and like kind of dancing.
There's this music that's like do and it's just ending the episode like in sync with the music, and it says carne, so it's like a butcher shop or a meat shop or something.
Yeah, I was confused about the grooving that the characters were doing.
Yeah, and there's a butcher with a rose in his mouth, and he's like hard jamming, and Gurr is dancing, and there's a little girl selling like mints on the side of the road. And I'm like, yeah, that's Mexico, I guess.
I was gonna say I haven't been, so I can't really speak to that, but
yeah, you will get lots of children walking up to you with sad, teary eyes and dirty faces, asking you to buy chiclets, and that kind of thing.
I've seen the end of the Terminator, so she goes. Yeah, Sarah. The movie ends with Sarah Connor like getting gas at a gas station, and this like little Hispanic kid takes her picture and charges her for it.
Be like, here you go, that'll be $5, and you're
exactly.
Like,
I think what? It was $5. Yeah. And well, he's like speaking in Spanish, and there's like this older guy like standing next to him, and Sarah's like, "What did he just say?" He's like, "He says you are a very beautiful senora, and he hates to charge you for this picture, but if you don't pay him $5, his father will beat him."
What? How do you know that? Because I'm his father.
And she says something like "nice hustle, kid," and gives him like $5 and then drives off.
I remember that. Right. I'm like, why does this sound so familiar? Oh, yeah,
it's the
Terminator.
It's the very final scene of the Terminator. It's like the epilogue scene.
Yeah.
And then it ends with like dun 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 dun. Do 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 do.
Iconic. Yeah.
Iconic. I love the Terminator movies. Well, most of them. Some of them. I really like T1 and T2, and I actually like T3. I'm cool with
just it being T1 and T2.
I defend Terminator 3. I actually dig Terminator 3. It's the worst out of the first three easily, but even Terminator Salvation's all right. Terminator Genesis. Not bad. Terminator Genesis. Welcome to the Terminator podcast with The Siege.
Yeah.
Terminator Genesis. The first half hour or so was kind of fun when it was like recreating scenes from the first movie, but like slightly different. But then when they do that whole like time travel into the present, like bullshit, then the movie, and John Connor is now a Terminator, the movie goes off the rails. It also starts, that movie also starts in the future, and unlike Terminator Salvation, it's actually the 80s version of the future with like the dark skies and like purple lasers like flying across the sky and stuff like that. So that was cool.
When Tesla released its like Cybertruck, the first thing I thought of was that looks like a Skynet vehicle.
Yeah. Terminator Dark Fate, the latest one. I saw it in theaters, didn't think much of it. I got it. I rewatched it again a few months ago because I found it on 4K Blu-ray on sale at Best Buy for like $4.99 for a 4K Blu-ray. These things are usually like $35.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? For $5 for a 4K Blu-ray, I'll give Terminator Dark Fate another shot. So I rewatched it, and I liked it a lot more than I did the first time. So
there you go.
Dark Fate's all right. Anyway,
the question is, Christopher Siege, did you like Invader Zim a lot more than the first times you watched it?
One thing that I found kind of interesting, I definitely like the first segment more than the second one. One thing that I found kind of interesting about the first segment is like, I kind of wonder if they're trying to make a statement about kind of the dangers of like idealizing life, like taking your cues of what life should be through watching television. So that I found kind of interesting. I actually really liked the whole scene when they were actually at the parent teacher conference and the robots being like really fucking weird.
Yeah.
Like all of that I really liked. Didn't like the second segment that much, them getting lost in the city. There were a couple of moments here and there. I actually find Gurr really annoying, to be honest.
I knew you would.
And it might even just be because like I knew so many people whose personality was that. So like
that's the thing, right? Like you can't disassociate.
Yeah.
And again, Archer, I can't disassociate like a whole bunch, like 10 people like sitting around in a circle, just like screaming the same quotes at each other and like laughing at each other.
Yeah.
And like me and my friend looking at each other and we're like, are we in a different dimension where like this is what's funny now?
One joke in Archer, and this is one that no one ever talks about, but of course it's a joke that I actually really gravitated toward. It was in one of the one of the mid seasons, like maybe season 6 or something like that. I can't remember. But Archer is on this island and he's trying to explain things to the people who live there who speak another language. And a common thing is throughout that episode is like every time he tries to explain something, he uses an idiom, and they're like, oh, well, that doesn't, when it gets translated to them, they all react in like a weird way, and they're like, oh, well, that idiom doesn't really translate very well. And so it actually means something else. And then like finally, like the culmination of that joke later on in the episode is Archer like does it again in like a really tense moment, and Cyril's like, stop using, you're using an idiom. And Archer's like, Jesus Christ, it's really hard to explain things without using an idiom. I'm not explaining the joke very well. It plays a lot better like when you're watching it, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't, some shows are for us and others are not. Archer is not for me, and maybe Invader Zim is.
And
that's okay.
Archer is for me, and Invader Zim it is not. I don't think.
Unsubscribed.
Sorry, Cone Killer. I wanted to like it, and when I was saying this to someone earlier. When a patron pitches a show to us, I feel really guilty when I don't like it. It's only happened a couple of times before, but it has happened, so I apologize. I gave it a shot. I bought this episode on iTunes.
Yeah, you supported it.
Yeah, I paid $1.99 Canadian for it.
The first thing I do is try to find it on YouTube, and it's often successful.
I go to I bring up the Just Watch app to see if it's available on a streaming service for free, and if it's not, then I just go and buy it on iTunes. I should look for things on YouTube more, but it never, in my head, I'm like,
I know. This is like the fourth time I found something on YouTube that
in my head I'm like, oh, this is content that someone owns. Of course it's not going to be on YouTube.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't occur to me.
And then we filmed the episode, and you're like, I got this on this, and I'm like, I found it on YouTube.
Well, that was our thoughts of Invader Zim, episode 20, a LaserComb podcast. If you want to support this podcast, or even pick an episode or pick a show for us to review a random episode of, go to Patreon, just like the aforementioned Cone Killer Confusor did. Patreon.com/LaserComb. Starting at the $5 tier, you get bonus preamble audio of us kind of talking for this and all of the other shows, of us like talking about this, that, or the other thing in the lead up to actually recording the shows proper. You also get a monthly-ish commentary track. We recently finished up the first 3 Matrix movies. We were going to do something else, but recently we decided, you know what, fuck it. The Matrix Resurrections is out now for rent, so we might as well just do that too.
Yeah.
But if you want to pick a show for us to do what we just did here, $10 tier, you can do that. The only rules are the show has to be completed and it has to be narrative based. So no reality shows, no game shows, no pro wrestling, no sports, nothing like that. Also, at the $10 tier, you get our weekly news and current events program, LAZOR Tonight. So go check that out. Patreon.com/LAZOR. Helps us out. Social media, if you want to follow this or the other shows proper on Facebook, you can do that at facebook.com/LAZORComb. Or you can follow me on Twitter at LAZORComb, LAZORCOMB. Cal, what socials do you want to plug?
I am also on the Twitter sphere at NeoCal, NEO_KAL.
So go give him a follow, give me a follow, give this show a like, give it a subscribe, give it a thumbs up, anything. Now, to figure out what we're going to be back for next week.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, this is how it starts. All right, so we're going to go to numbergenerator.org. Let's bring up screen share, shall we? What we're going to be talking about next week is pitched to us by our patron, Jared. Big shout out to him. What he wants us to watch next week is Preacher. Preacher is a show I'm familiar with. I actually watched the first season of it. It's based on a Garth Ennis comic book from the 90s, which I did read a little bit of when I was younger. Garth Ennis is probably more known. His more known property at this point is probably The Boys, which is a very successful show on Amazon Prime Video. Preacher lasted 4 seasons for a total of 43 episodes. All right. So random numbers between 1 and 43. Here we go. Stop. Holy Christ. We landed on from a random number from between episodes 1 and 43. We landed on episode 1. Holy shit. All right, so we're going to be back next week with episode 1 of Preacher. What a great starting point, especially since I don't think Cal has actually seen this show.
Number 1. If you want to get me to watch a show, that's the perfect time to watch it.
And it's an episode I've seen too, and that show is very serialized. So the fact that we're starting off with, or we're going to be doing episode 1 is a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's cool. I mean, if you're watching this on video, you saw the screen there, number generator.
Yeah, he doesn't rig it. He doesn't rig the system.
Oh, it wasn't rigged at all. We landed on episode 1, so rad. All right, we'll be back next week, like I said, with episode 1 of Preacher on episode 21 of the LAZOR podcast. And we're gonna get out of here. I have been one of your hosts, The Siege.
And I'm NeoCal.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Take a trip to another dimension.